The movie begins with a toddler who's placed in a safety bubble because the baby was born with no immunities in his body, meaning any germ could unalive him. When he turned 4 years old, the hospital thought it was safe to release him in his parents' care. They get home and immediately his mom gets into defense mode. She pierces through the kid's ball before it hits her son. They get into the house and his parents are relieved that he's finally safe from the world. They get him to his room and his parents had made the most of making sure his room is safe from any germs. They name the boy Jimmy, and his mom puts him to bed. The next day she bakes him cookies and then watches TV with him. She also becomes his teacher and has him reading a book. She rewards him for how good he's getting. Later on, the neighborhood kids bully him outside his window and his mom sticks up for him by watering them away. The next day his father tries bonding with him by teaching him how to ride a bike in his bubble. His mom gets in the room and scolds him for trying to unalive him. Jimmy quickly grows up and at 16, his father gifts him a guitar. As he practices his new hobby, he hears a car pulling up to his neighbor's house. As he checks to who it is, he sees a beautiful girl named Chloe, who's moving in. The next day, he washes his window so he can look at her beauty for as long as he can. Chloe looks back and sees him. Jimmy quickly looks away. The following morning, Jimmy wakes up with an erection. He tries hitting it, which causes him to scream for his mom. She quickly gets in his room and sees it. She tells Jimmy to sing the Pledge of Allegiance, in which he does, and it eventually goes down. His mom sadly realizes his son is growing into adulthood. Later on the day, Chloe is dropped off by her friends from school and she decides to go to Jimmy's house. She knocks and his dad lets her in. She follows Jimmy's tube to his bedroom. She gets there and finds him behaving oddly. He sees her and quickly gets up and tells her he was just playing around. They finally introduce each other and she asks her if she plays the guitar. She says no. Jimmy tells her he can teach her. She says not today but promises to come back tomorrow. Later on, his mom cleans the outside of the bubble and says Chloe isn't the kind of friend Jesus would want to be friends with, but Jimmy is too far gone to listen to her. The next day, he tries teaching her how to play the guitar. They get closer with each other and she frequently visits him. Chloe even spends Christmas with him and gifts him a pet guinea. A couple months later, Jimmy's taking pictures of Chloe for her prom. She brings her boyfriend Mark and she introduces them. He offers Jimmy a cigarette but Jimmy has no idea of what it means. He tells Jimmy what him and Chloe are going to do after prom. Chloe walks in and they leave to go to the function. A few days later, Jimmy sees them from his window and wishes that was him. He gets frustrated with his living condition as he can't experience life. The following week, Chloe visits Jimmy to tell him the good news. He asks what is it. Chloe says Mark asked her to marry him. Jimmy gets emotional and gives back the guinea pig she gifted him for Christmas. Chloe gets emotional and leaves. The whole day he sits and thinks about his decision. He then opens the box that she left him with before leaving, and it's a message of her love for him. And Jimmy screams her name, startling his mother. He spends the whole night designing his bubble suit and makes sure it has enough oxygen for 3 days. He gets out of his room and falls downstairs as he's not used to walking in it. He gets out of the house for the first time and acts like a small kid in a candy store. He runs off, as it is his first time running for this long. He falls down but picks himself up with optimism. He gets to the bus station and the clerk there is weirded out by him. Jimmy says it's his first time out in the world. Jimmy tells him he wants to go to Niagara Falls. The clerk says it's $260. He pulls out coins and asks how far the coins can get him. The guy asks him to take 2 steps back, which he does, and the clerk says that's as far as he can go with his coins. Seeing that he can't convince the guy otherwise, he walks away. As he crosses the road he's hit by a bus. It reverses back and people come out asking if he's alright. He says yes and they offer to take him to his destination. They pick him up and throw him in the back of their bus. They sing along and dance as the driver drives off. Jimmy enjoys their company. His mom walks to his bedroom to give him breakfast, only to see him nowhere. On the road, the group explains what their cult believes in, and Jimmy mocks their belief, in which they get offended by him and kick him out of their bus. He walks through the desert in the scorching heat and is chased by a vulture. Meanwhile, his parents pull up to the bus station and his mom asks the clerk has he seen Jimmy. The clerk explains he saw him being taken by people in a bus heading to Vegas. They quickly get in the car and drive away. Jimmy comes across a biker and the man is startled by him. He de-escalates the situation by offering his help by fixing his bike. At the cult's meeting, their leader shows them a portrait of the Chosen One. When the group from earlier take a closer look, they realize they had kicked out the Chosen One from their bus. Their leader says they have to find and release him. Those who had rejected him will burn in hell. The group regret their decision and decide to look for him. Jimmy finishes repairing the man's bike and he introduces himself as Slim. They ride off and get to Vegas in the evening. Slim takes him to the casino and he lets him press the button, but unfortunately they lose. Slim says he's going to steal money from someone. Jimmy tells him he's going to be late. He decides to steal a scooter and gets away with it. A few minutes into riding, his parents see him on the road and his mom calls on him. He stops his scooter and his dad turns the car around, accidentally running through Jimmy, and he gets thrown in a train. He gets to the cafe and finds a group of men bullying an Indian man. He calls them out and the group approaches him and the sheriff asks why he's in a bubble. He explains his condition and everyone panics thinking he has a disease. They run out of the cafe and lock him in. A fire starts. Jimmy panics and is saved by the man he saved earlier. He gets in his van and they get away. Jimmy thanks the man for saving him and the man asks how he can help him. Jimmy asks him to please get him to Niagara Falls. The man agrees to take him there. They drive past the vegetation fields and out of nowhere Jimmy wakes up from a nightmare screaming, causing the man to drive into a cow. He gets on his knees and cries out for it. The man gets up and tells Jimmy to go on and continue with journey alone. He walks away. The next day, Chloe gets her dress fitted and opens up about her friendship with Jimmy to her soon-to-be sister-in-law. She tells Chloe she's better off with her brother because it would have never worked out with him. Chloe tries convincing herself that she's right. When Chloe gets home, everything she watches on TV reminds him of Jimmy. Meanwhile, Jimmy gets a transport to get him to Niagara Falls. The old man encourages him to fight for love. They drive throughout the night. Jimmy wakes up from his sleep. He asks if he got any sleep, but the man doesn't answer him. Jimmy realizes he has passed on while driving. He gets thrown out to a gas station. As he walks in, he asks to use the telephone. He calls Chloe, but Mark answers and tells him he needs to move on with his life because him and Chloe would never work. Jimmy realizes he's right because even if he gets there, he could never be able to hold Chloe in his arms. He calls his parents and tells them his location. They get there and find him resting. His mom is grateful for his safety and his dad puts him in the car. He sees his son is bothered by something and he encourages him to go out in the world and fight for what he wants. Jimmy takes his advice and runs off. His mom begs him to come back, but he refuses and gets on a plane. He flies over Niagara Falls and gets excited that he's arrived, but falls from the plane. Fortunately, he's protected by his bubble and gets out the water. He runs as fast as he can to the church. Meanwhile, Chloe was about to say her vows. Then Jimmy walks up and stops her from saying them. He approaches her and removes his suit. He tells her he would rather spend 1 minute holding her, then lived his whole life accepting that he could not. They kiss and Jimmy loses consciousness. Everybody that Jimmy met on the road bust in the door wanting to fight each other. They see their friend on the floor dying. His mom cries over him and his dad tells her to tell Jimmy that he's not dead, and forces her to tell him that he developed immunities at 4 years old. Jimmy gets up disappointed that he was lied to his whole life but forgives her. He looks at Chloe and they officially marry in their own way. Make sure to like and subscribe for more notifications. Until next time, see you soon.